Since this movie recently celebrated its 30th anniversary, I figured I might as well review it. And today's movie I'm going to be reviewing is the 1996 disaster movie Twister, starring Bill Paxton, Helen Hunt, and directed by Jon de Bont. Yeah, that movie. And I gotta say, even though I love this movie, even though I love the movie, I'm not really a big fan of this cover art on the Blu-ray. Like, I really do not like the blue color filter here on the Blu-ray cover. Like honestly, they should have just used the original cover of the movie, because the original cover of the movie was like a black background, and the cover on the original VHS and even when this first came out on DVD, even the original DVD cover looked better than this. They should have just put that on the Blu-ray case, but oh well, it is what it is, and Warner Bros. Made that decision, not me. I don't make the rules, but yeah. So what is the plot of this movie? Well, the plot of this movie is as follows. A team of estranged meteorologists and storm chasers racing to deploy an innovative tornado research device across Oklahoma. They must battle violent extreme weather and corporate-backed revival team to successfully capture data from inside the storms. And this movie's got a really good cast. You got Bill Paxton as Bill Harding. You got Helen Hunt as rest in peace, Bill Paxton. You got Helen Hunt as Dr. Joe Harding. You got Richard Lyne as Mr. Thornton. You got Rusty Schwimmer as Mrs. Thornton. You got Aniki DeBont as the farm girl. You got Jamie Gertz as Dr. Melissa Reeves. You got Philip Seymour Hoffman as Dustin Davis. You got Todd Field as Tim Belzer Lewis, and Carrie Elwes, which I probably butchered that name, as Dr. Jonas Miller. But anyways, how was this movie made? Well, Steven Spielberg's company, Amblin Entertainment, produced Twister and had financed backing from Warner Bros. Pictures and Universal. And in return, Warner Bros. Was given the North American distribution rights, and Universal's company, United International Pictures, would have the international distribution rights. The pitch was not a script, but was a proof of concept of the visual effects by Industrial Light and Magic, entirely done by CGI, and a pickup truck driving towards a tornado, pulling up a tractor with one of its tires snapping off and smashing through the truck's windshield. And ILM assigned Stephen Meter was the special effects supervisor for the experience with their tornadoes, and created simulations while working with storm chasers as well. And when it came to directors, executive producer Steven Spielberg, coming off of the success of the critically acclaimed movie Jurassic Park from 1993, because when Jurassic Park came out, it was a very well received. The movie got excellent reviews by critics and audiences, and to this day, the first Jurassic Park movie from 1993, it is widely regarded as one of the greatest movies of all time by both critics and audiences. But because of the success Steven Spielberg had with that movie, he was initially going to direct Twister. But the studios also had other directors in mind, like James Cameron, Tim Burton, and even Robert Zemeckis were considered to direct the movie. And Tom Hanks was originally the choice to play the lead actor, which I like Tom Hanks as an actor. I personally cannot see him as a storm chaser, though. So I'm glad it was Bill Paxton instead. And again, no disrespect, I think Tom Hanks is a good actor, but I just don't really see him as a storm chaser. But, however, in the end, Jon de Bont was eventually hired to direct, because originally he was going to direct the first American Godzilla film, which Roland Emmerich would eventually direct, but Jon de Bont left due to creative differences. He was hired by Steven Spielberg after Jon de Bont directed the critically acclaimed action movie Speed from 1994, starring Keanu Reeves, which was a huge success at the box office. After the movie was shot and marketed, Twister would go on to be released in theaters on May 10th, 1996 in the U.S. And fun fact, this was also the very first movie to ever be released on DVD, because VHS, as we know, was first invented in the 1970s, and it was really huge from the 70s to the 90s. And this movie did come out on VHS in 1996, but a year later, this movie was officially added to DVD when the DVD player was invented in 1997. So this was actually the very first movie that ever got a DVD release, fun fact. But anyways, when it came to the box office, Twister made $495 million worldwide and was the second highest grossing movie in 1996 behind Independence Day. Now, when it came to the reactions, the movie got decently positive reviews from critics and has gained a huge cult following. And the movie was so big that it had a legacy sequel, a standalone legacy sequel in 2024 called Twisters, which I will eventually review that sometime down the road. Now, as for my reaction to the movie, Twister is great, and it's definitely up there for one of the best natural disaster movies. Like, honestly, I cannot decide. Like, I often go back and forth. When it comes to natural disaster movies, I often go back and forth, whether I prefer this movie or the 1997 movie Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones. Like, I think they're both as equally good, in my opinion. And I reviewed Volcano months back, but this is definitely up there. Like, this and Volcano often compete for my favorite natural disaster movie. But maybe today I'll say Volcano just because it's a little more underrated. But, I mean, Twister's a classic too. But anyways, let's get into my review. So, the movie starts off on a farm in Oklahoma in June 1969 where a young Joe Thornton and her family they basically take shelter in an underground storm cellar as an F5 tornado destroys their home and claims the life of the little girl's father. And I have to say, this is a very well done, intense scene that really sets the tone of the rest of the movie, where her dad, the farmer, is basically trying to hold the cellar door shut, but basically the storm is so strong that it tears it off its hinges and blows the dad into the tornado. And again, I think that's a rather well done opening scene. We now cut to present day in 1996, where we see a GOES-8 weather satellite in space, and then a weatherman on the TV and radio says, at 7 a.m. in Oklahoma City, the temperature is 75 degrees. We then cut to a national severe storm laboratory where people observe data, and a woman says, this is going to be a long day. We are then introduced to Bill Harding, played by Bill Paxton, who's driving a truck talking to Dr. Melissa Reeves about his wife, Dr. Joe Harding, played by Helen Hunt, who throughout the course of the movie, her and Bill are going through a divorce. But, that things later change, but we'll get to that. And we are introduced to Dr. Joe Harding, played by Helen Hunt, who her and Bill basically lead a team of storm chasers throughout the course of the movie. And early on, we are introduced to Dusty, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is good friends with Bill, and Bill introduces Melissa to him. And I've always liked Philip Seymour Hoffman as an actor. I think the actor passed away. I don't 100% know, so don't quote me on that. But I've always liked him as an actor, and I thought he was really good as the bad guy in Mission Impossible 3. That honestly might be his best role, but he's really good in this movie too. Anyways, Bill decides to ask Dusty where Joe is, and Dusty says she's by the Doppler, broke down again, running out of a grant money. Bill then says to Melissa, why don't you hang out here for a while and I'll be right back. And then Joe says, hi, Bill. And Bill says, hi, Joe, how is it going? And then Joe says, it's going good. You see the sky today? Bill then says, yeah, she's really talking. And as Bill says this, we see a lightning bolt in the sky, which is a very cool visual. One thing I will say about this movie is not only is the cast great, but the characters are great and you believe their chemistry. Joe says catch and throws a line down to Bill, and then Bill says, and then Joe basically says, it's the biggest series of storms in 12 years, one lined up after another. NSSLS, never seen anything like it. And what also makes this a great disaster movie is that the movie really takes its time to develop the characters, even when there's no destruction going on, which is what, the movie's engaging, even when there's no disaster stuff going on. And that's what makes it a great movie, is the movie gives us time to breathe with the characters, which is something that many disaster movies lack. And then Bill kindly asks Joe for the divorce papers, and Joe says, "Why? Are you in a hurry? Are you getting married?" Bill then says, "Actually, I am." And then Joe asks Miranda, and then Bill says, "Melissa, actually." And then Joe hands him the divorce papers. But Bill notices she missed a page, and he points it out to her. And then Melissa basically asks, Joe basically asks, "Is Melissa here with Dusty? I want to meet her." And then Bill says, "No, you don't." And then she talks to Melissa and says, "Nice to meet you." But then her and Bill walk away as Melissa is on the phone. And then Dr. Joe Harding mentions that she mentions a thing called Dorothy. And we basically learned that Dorothy is a syndrolic instrument package designed by storm chasers Joe and Bill to be deployed directly into a tornado. It is loaded with hundreds of small winged sensors that are released inside the funnel to take exact scientific measurements. The Dorothy even has a painting of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz on it, hence the name of it, which I thought was a nice little homage to The Wizard of Oz. I do like The Wizard of Oz movie from 1939. I think that movie's an absolute classic. Despite me being very hit or miss on musicals, that is one of the ones I do like. No, I have not seen Wicked. I don't care to see those movies for personal reasons, but I do like the 1939 Wizard of Oz movie. But getting back to this, about 15 minutes into the movie, Dr. Joe Harding is notified that the NSSL says the cap is breaking and the towers are going up 30 miles to the dry line. So then Joe, Bill, and the team agreed to go storm chasing. And I have to say, the storm chasing scenes are very exciting and thrilling, which is what you want in a good disaster flick. We are then introduced to the main villain, or the main antagonist of the movie, Jonas Miller, played by Cary Elwes, who I like as an actor. He was, of course, the bad guy in this movie. He also played one of the good guys, Dr. Gordon, in the original Saw movie. He was also in Liar Liar with Jim Carrey, which I love that movie. That movie is a comedy classic, but I've always liked this guy as an actor. He's very underrated. I don't know why his career wasn't bigger, but it is what it is. But then Bill basically talks to Melissa about Jonas Miller, and he says, "We all started out in the same lab. Then Jonas got himself corporate sensors. He's in it for the money, not the science. He's got a lot of high-tech gadgets, but he's got himself no instincts, and he doesn't have Dorothy." And I like the scene where Dr. Jonas Miller is introducing people at a diner to DOT-03, which he basically stole Bill's invention and he changed the name. And then, of course, there's the scene where Bill, rightfully so, punches Jonas Miller in the face, calling him out for stealing his invention. And then like a jerk, the bad guy basically says to him, "Also, I really like your weather reports." And then Bill was about to punch him again before he stopped. And I like the part where he says, "Dorothy, you took her, you DAM and thief." Like, that scene is really funny, really good one-liner. And so Bill, Joe, and the gang of storm chasers are determined to beat Jonas Miller's group to the storm to collect their data with Dorothy, which does create a good storyline in the movie. And 30 minutes into the movie, we see a big tornado that Bill and his crew are driving towards. The distance of the tornado is 3 miles southeast, and the scene with Joe driving the Jeep with Bill driving the Jeep as fast as he can, and then he's being chased by the tornado, which destroys a barn at least 500 feet away from them. Like, that's a very cool scene. And then Bill accidentally crashes his truck underneath the bridge, and him and Joe get out of the Jeep, and even just the sound of the wind blowing is intense due to the sound design. Then Bill and Joe get under the bridge, and they grab the stand to hold on to so they don't blow away. Again, very intense scene. There is also another model called Dorothy 2 as a backup plan, and this movie is very well directed in terms of fast-paced action, scenes, destruction, and even cinematography at certain points. And not only was Steven Spielberg a main producer on this, Michael Crichton was also an executive producer on this movie. And that was one of the reasons that a lot of people were hyped for this movie at the time, because when the original Jurassic Park novel came out in 1990, it was a huge hit with not only in terms of sales, but, critical reception. And then, Of course, when the original Jurassic Park movie came out in 1993, not only was it a big hit at the box office, but the movie received phenomenal reviews by critics and audiences, and the original Jurassic Park is considered one of the greatest movies of all time by both critics and audiences, and it's also considered one of Steven Spielberg's best movies. It's my second favorite movie he's directed behind the original Jaws, but granted, Michael Crichton didn't direct or write this movie, but even though Michael Crichton and Spielberg were only producers on this movie, they did a good job with it. I also appreciate how this movie uses a lot of practical effects. Now, yes, this movie does have CGI, and some of the CGI doesn't hold up the best by today's standards, but this was made in 1996. You know, they were still figuring it out. So I don't entirely fault it on the filmmaker. And 41 minutes and 50 seconds into the movie, Bill, Joe, and Melissa, all in the same truck, are now in the core of the storm. And I really like the scene where the tornado splits in half, forming two tornadoes, and Melissa says, "We got sisters." Very cool scene. And then 42 minutes and 20 seconds into the movie, there's the scene where a cow is flying in the air from the tornado, and Melissa, who's on the phone, says, "I must go, Julia. We have cows." I mean, that scene in particular has not aged the best due to the poor CGI. However, that one scene does not ruin the entire movie like some people claim it does, at least in my opinion. And I like the scene 57 minutes and 30 seconds into the movie where we see another tornado and Bill and Joe drive towards the storm and multiple hailstones are falling everywhere, and Bill climbs through the back window into the truck to power up Dorothy. Very good scene. And during this scene, I mean, like, this is an intense scene. I mean, hail is falling, a tree branch flies towards the truck, but it misses. A bike is thrown at the truck's windshield. Then a power line lands on the truck after Bill and Joe get out. Again, good stuff. And Joe wants to go back to get the Dorothy machine, but Bill tells her that it's not a good idea. And he eventually convinces her to let it go, which she does. And I think that that's a good scene because that scene shows that, you know, safety matters first before what you want. And, you know, you got to let stuff go sometimes. And I do think that is a good message in this movie. And I love the scene later on in the movie where people are at a drive-in movie theater watching The Shining, and then a tornado goes through it, making people run into the basement of a diner, and the tornado destroys the theater screen. And during this scene, you know, when people are in the basement, I mean, Bill, Joe, and the other people in the basement, they're holding on to each other as tight as they can, and they inevitably avoid death. I mean, like, the windows break, like a giant metal disc flies and it almost hits them. Again, good stuff. The whole scene, 1 hour and 21 minutes into the movie, where Bill and Joe go into a destroyed house to save a woman, is a great scene with a lot of good practical effects. In fact, honestly, that scene right there is probably the best usage of practical effects into the movie due to the fact that there's no CGI in that scene. And then the house collapses once everyone is out of the house, which, again, good stuff. And I know this is random. I'll get back to the review, but I gotta mention it. I am a huge fan of the Austin Powers movies with Mike Myers. Like, I really like the scene in Austin Powers 3 Goldmember where Fat Bastard says, "You know what my favorite Helen Hunt movie is? Twister," and then he gives one of the guys a titty twister. Like, that was actually how I first heard about this movie. I was 10 years old and my dad showed me Austin Powers, and then there was that whole scene in the movie. Like, that's honestly how I first heard about this movie. But I didn't actually get around to watching this movie until 2019. But I've been a fan of this movie ever since I first saw it. But that was just a little fun side story I wanted to give. Now let's get back to the rest of the review. Anyways, Dr. Joe Harding has a plan. She attaches flying things to the balls that go in the Dorothy machine. That way they'll fly into the tornado and collect the scientific data that they need. And I love the scene where a log traps Bill's Jeep into one spot, and as Bill tries to back up, a semi-truck pushes the truck back, and then another semi-truck slams on the ground a few hundred feet away from them, causing a big explosion, and their partners on the radio call and ask, "Whoa, did you see that explosion?" And then Bill's like, yes, we did. And I like the scene where Bill is on the walkie-talkie and basically Eddie is in danger and Eddie's in the car with Jonas, and he basically tells Eddie to turn around to avoid the tornado, basically warning him that, you're gonna die if you go near it. But Jonas turns off the communication because he wants nothing to do with Bill, and then which leads to a giant metal rod basically going through the window, leading to Eddie's death, as well as the villain Jonas. So you can say that the bad guy Jonas got a taste of his own medicine. Which, I mean, the guy, like I said, he was a jerk and he basically still stole Bill's invention. So I guess karma came and got him in the end. But anyways, going on with the review. Then, of course, there's the most well-known scene of the movie where Bill is driving the Jeep and a house lands sideways, and then Bill says at the top of his lungs, "I think we're going in." And then he drives through the house at full speed. Awesome stuff. Like, I really like the scene where he's driving the Jeep, like, he's going on the side of the walls, up a rail of stairs, and just a bunch of stuff flies everywhere, like parts of the wall fall in the car drives up sideways on the wall through the stairs, it crashes at the top, basically making the wall rip apart and when they come out. Again, that right there is a good use of practical effects. Well, mostly practical, that is. Then there's the scene where, there's the scene where Joe turns on Dorothy 4, which is in the back of the truck, in the back of the Jeep, and then Bill drives through a cornfield, then him and Joe jump out of the moving Jeep. Then it causes the metal things to go flying into the tornado, as well as Dorothy 4 and the truck to get the scientific readings, which actually ends up succeeding. And I like the scene where Bill and Joe avoid part of a barn hitting them, and then they go inside another barn trying to tie themselves to metal pipes to basically stay secure to the ground, which works and is a very well done scene, especially with the music and the intensity. And I know people say, "Oh, it's not realistic." I don't care, okay? This movie is not a documentary. Like if I want to see something realistic with tornadoes, I'll just go watch a documentary. I mean, this movie is, for all the years that, people complain about, how unrealistic this is, have you not seen Fast and Furious 9? Cars literally go to space in that movie. So, yeah, you have no room to complain, at least in my opinion. But anyways, the tornado fades away, and I like the ending because after the tornado fades away, Dr. Joe warms up to Bill, and she decides not to divorce him, and then they kiss as their team watches and happily celebrates that, they were able to win at the end of the day. So, yeah. I know this was a bit of a long-winded review, but I wanted to do this to get out the way. I felt like I needed to give this movie the review it deserved. And, now, if I only have a small complaint, a lot of the special effects hold up, the practical effects, but there are some parts here and there where some of the CGI doesn't hold up, especially the scene with the cow flying in the air. But other than that, Twister is a fantastic disaster movie. That's my review of Twister. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I am going to give Twister a 9 out of 10. So, yeah. There we go, guys. That was my review of Twister. I want to hear from you guys in the comment section down below. What do you think of this movie? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Please comment down below and let me know. And, we'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye now.